Hi guys, the Miniature Irishman here, and welcome to my second video in the Escape from Goblin Town painting series. I hope you enjoy painting this model just as much as I did, so grab your paints and your brushes and let's get started. As with all the models in this series, I first prime them using Citadel's Raithbone, but you can prime them using any colour you wish, it will still work just as well. Once that's dry, the first base colour I'm going to use is Mephiston Red, and as with all my paints, except for the washes, I thin them down with a couple of drops of water to make sure they go on nice and even. Give all the areas of the cloak 2 nice thin coats of this colour, making sure that you cover all the areas. Don't be afraid to make mistakes at this stage because we can neaten them up later. For the face and the hands, I use Bugmans Glow. Just try to be careful not to get any on the cloak around the hands, but if you do, neaten it up with Mephiston Red. For the boots, 2 thin coats of Steel Legion Drab, or you can use any brown colour that you like. The colour I use for the beard and hair is Dawnstone. Make sure with this that you get into all the recesses and nooks and crannies, trying not to get any of this colour onto the other areas. The final base colour here is Leadbelcher. I'm going to use this on the sword, and once that's dry it's time for shading. So I decided to wash the whole model except for the skin with Agrax Earthshade. It's very quick and effective, but as you'll see later I changed my mind on this just a little bit. As with all shading, don't forget to use a damp brush and remove any excess pulling of the shade. For the skin I used Reikland Fleshshade, avoiding all the other areas. And once you've finished this, so I didn't like that both the inner and outer cloak were the same colour. So I decided to tint the outer cloak using Druchii Violet. It looks very subtle, but once we start the highlight stage, you'll see the difference this makes. For the first layer on the cloak, I added a little screamer pink to the Mephiston Red, just a tiny drop, and highlighted all the raised areas, avoiding the recesses where the shade had settled. Don't be scared at this point. It does look very bright and maybe a little pink, but that's just because the paint's wet. Once it's dry, you'll see that it looks a lot better. The inner parts of the cloak, I just added a little Ceramite White to the Mephiston Red, and highlighted the raised areas on the inner cloak and arms. Once that's dry, I added a little bit of Ceramite White to the Screamer Pink and Mephiston Red mix. Use that to highlight the cloak again, but this time leave a little bit of the original colour showing through. You might need to give this 2 thin coats. I then added a little more white to the mix and added my final highlight to the cloak. You can keep adding some white if you want to push the contrast even further, but I think this is enough for this model. Using Cadian Fleshtone, I applied 2 coats for the skin. The hands are really small on these models, so just try your best to pick out the details. Most importantly, just give 2 nice thin coats over the hands and the face. Go back in with Dawnstone and pick out the individual hairs around the model. As you can see, I switched to a smaller brush for this. Just makes life a little bit easier. A wee bit of advice though, don't do what I did and drink a lot of coffee before this step. You want your hands to be as steady as possible while doing this. Once this layer is dry, I went back in again with Celestial Grey, covering a little bit less of the hair this time around. Again, at this point, just relax. It looks crazy when it's wet, but once the paint is dry, the highlights will start to blend in with each other. Final layer on the skin, I used Kislev Flesh. Just pick out the most prominent features. 2 thin coats of this will do. Using Ulthuan Grey, I went in for my final highlight, picking again even less of the hair out, just trying to hit the very raised areas of the hair around the model. For the sword, paint all the raised areas with Leadbelcher. Try not to get any into those recessed areas. Then run your brush along the very edge of the sword using Runefang Steel. I decided at this point to try my first attempt at freehand design. So using Abaddon Black on the trim of the inner cloak on the sleeves as well. I just drew little triangles, just again to distinguish the inner cloak from the outer cloak. You don't have to do this, I just like experimenting sometimes, trying new things. If you do this, paint over the area with Agrax Earthshade once the black is dry, just to help it blend in. The eyes are so tiny in this model, so you don't really have to paint them if you don't want to. But why not give it a try? So I use Ceramite White on the tip of a very small brush and put 2 small dots in where the eyes should be. It looks a bit scary. So once the Ceramite White is dry, shade the area with Agrax Earthshade. It should stop them from looking so scary. So I think the model's looking really well now. Has a lot of character to it. But as always with all models, they won't look complete without a finished base. Coat the whole base in Dawnstone, giving it 2 nice coats, allowing it to dry in between each coat. Once that's dry, add a little black to the Dawnstone and draw some horizontal lines on the base. Follow this with some irregular vertical lines, varying the shapes as you go. This doesn't have to be really neat, as we're going to wash the base with Agrax Earthshade, which will tie all these details in together. You should try to use the same base for all your models if you're planning on playing with them. But for variety's sake, and in this series, I'll try and experiment with a few different bases. If you have any requests or any bases you'd like me to attempt, comment below and leave a like, and I'll get back to you and give them a try in future videos. As always, with all of your bases, give the rim a solid coat of black or any colour of your choice and the model's finished. So in just a few hours time, excluding drying time of course, it's possible to achieve a decent tabletop standard miniature. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, like and subscribe, and join me next time where I paint Bilbo Baggins from Citadel's escape from Goblin Town. Thanks very much. Goodbye.